Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? She sat near the back, civilian badge clipped to her jacket, cane leaning against her knee, silver hair pulled back in a tight knot. The projector hummed, flooding the walls with maps and data streams that painted the room in shades of blue and war. The air smelled of coffee, starch, and the faint tang of cold metal from the rows of chairs. Fort Bragg's new operations briefing hall always buzzed before a meeting, boots scraping against tile, nervous chatter, the familiar rhythm of soldiers who'd never known stillness. Yet when Clare Rivers entered, the noise dulled for just a heartbeat. Some faces turned, most didn't. Her badge said only one thing: Tour Coordinator. The captain sitting closest to the front tilted his head toward another officer and smirked. Tour guide, huh? Guess we're getting a field trip after all. Laughter rippled through the room, low but sharp, the kind that tests the air for permission. It got it. Claire didn't react. She adjusted her papers quietly, spine straight, expression steady. No one saw the quiet strength behind that calm face, or the faint tremor that ran through her fingers when she reached for the cane. Not weakness, memory. She waited for the colonel to begin. When introductions came around, voices echoed with titles and units. Captain Voss, 12th Logistics. Major Tanner, Field Command. Lieutenant Reed, Operations Support. And then, Clare Rivers, Logistics. Just that, no rank, no title. The colonel nodded absently and moved on. A few chuckles followed. She heard them all, even through the muted buzz of the small hearing aid tucked behind her left ear. But when the map appeared on the wall, her eyes shifted from the faces to the terrain. Satellite corridors stretched across the desert, glowing veins of red and blue. She leaned forward slightly, frowning. Sector 9. The ridgeline was wrong, the shading too smooth. No heat distortion markers, no tunnel scars. She spoke without thinking. Sector 9 isn't clear, she said softly. The colonel looked back. Excuse me. You're missing tunnels along the wadi, she replied. The laughter that followed was quieter this time. And sharper. And how would you know that, Ms. Rivers? The colonel asked. Her gaze didn't waver, because I built those maps myself. The room stilled. Even the projector's hum seemed to pause. No one said a word. Then mercifully someone coughed and the colonel forced a smile. All right, let's move on. The conversation resumed, but something had shifted. Not much, just enough for a few eyes to watch her differently. That morning had begun like any other. Cool air rolled across the base, sunlight flickering off distant rotor blades. Claire had driven through the security gate in her silver sedan, the guard waving her through with the same polite nod they gave every civilian consultant. The beep of the scanner was familiar, the sound of access granted. Inside, the cadence of soldiers marching reached her through the open window, the sound sharp and rhythmic. She used to march like that once, before the injury, before the retirement. The cane beside her seat reminded her with every movement that some parts of war never fully let go. She parked near the operations annex, shutting off the engine and sitting for a moment in silence. Her reflection in the windshield looked tired, lines around the eyes deeper now, streaks of gray cutting through her short blonde hair. She inhaled slowly, exhaled slower, then stepped out. Every step was measured, controlled, training disguised as routine. To the young soldiers who passed by, she looked like any other civilian analyst, polite, slow, unimportant. None of them would ever guess that she once spent nights crawling through Afghan dust, charting roads no drone could see, whispering coordinates into radios that barely worked through the static of gunfire. She hadn't come to relive that. She'd come to make sure no one repeated it. Inside the briefing hall, she set her things down early. The projector wasn't on yet. She preferred it that way, quiet, empty, honest. Her tablet glowed faintly as she opened the latest terrain models. Clean lines, perfect gradients, machine precision. But machines didn't bleed when they were wrong. Something about Sector 9 tugged at her. The curvature of the elevation too smooth. The shadows didn't match the satellite sun angle. She zoomed in closer. There, faint distortions at the valley floor. Collapsed mouths of tunnels. She reached for a red pen circling 3 points, then 4, then 5. Every mark matched a scar she remembered, buried under 12 years of sand and silence. To anyone else, the map was just a pattern of colors. To her, it was the memory of men shouting through static. The smell of cordite, the taste of grit. And a single voice screaming through the dust, "North Ridge, adjust course," before everything went white. The explosion that stole half her hearing had also given her something else, an instinct for danger so sharp it hurt to ignore. She pressed her pen harder into the paper until it nearly tore, then stopped. Someone was coming. Young officers trickled in, laughter bouncing off the metal chairs, boots squeaking against the floor. Their energy filled the room like static. One of them looked her way and muttered to another, "Civilians, huh? Probably never seen a firefight." Another chuckled, "She's got a cane, man. She's not seeing much of anything." She didn't turn, didn't correct them. Because she remembered what it felt like to laugh at what you didn't understand. And she also knew how fast war had a way of teaching humility. When Major Tanner entered, the energy snapped to attention. He was tall, composed, with the sharp-edged confidence of a man who thought he'd seen enough to know better. He didn't notice the woman at the back right away. "All right," he said briskly, "let's begin. Today, we'll review Southern Corridor reactivation. Intel confirms clearance in sectors 5 through 10. He tapped the control pad, and the main display bloomed to life. The digital map rotated slowly, Afghan ridges, valleys, and faded war routes. Claire watched every line, every shadow. The room was full of chatter, strategic jargon, call signs, route codes, but she barely heard it. Her eyes tracked the terrain like muscle memory. Captain Voss leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Hope our tour guide doesn't get lost," he whispered to his neighbor. A few chuckles. The sound prickled under her skin, but she said nothing. Instead, she kept writing. Tanner's voice filled the room. "We'll reopen this corridor Alpha 6 within the week. Convoy movement priority." That was when she saw it. The smallest ripple in the elevation data. A faint discoloration where there shouldn't be any. She felt it before she understood it. A warning rising from the base of her spine like static memory. Her hand lifted slowly. "Sir," she said quietly, "your overlay skips a 30-meter depression near grid Alpha 6. The room paused. Tanner frowned. "Intel team cleared that last month, nothing there." Claire didn't blink. "Not if the tunnel mouths collapsed inward. You're missing secondary exits." Someone snorted. "Tunnels? Ma'am, that's ancient history. We've got drones now." She ignored him. Reached into her bag, pulled out a small encrypted flash drive. Tanner frowned. "Ms. Rivers, what are you doing?" She inserted the drive into her tablet. The main screen flickered. Her credentials flashed green, access granted. A second later, the wall lit up with data overlays, old, grainy, but terrifyingly detailed. Timestamps 2004, 2008, 2012. Heat signatures, collapse sites, old recon corridors. "These," she said evenly, "are original deep recon models from Operation Torchlight and Dawnfire, all tunnels verified." The color drained from more than one face. Her old maps aligned perfectly with theirs, but added what theirs had erased. Every forgotten wadi, every scar of earth. "You're saying we missed insurgent tunnels inactive for a decade?" Tanner asked, crossing his arms. She zoomed in. "I'm saying they were never decommissioned." Her stylus traced faint rings. "Collapse patterns here. cavity retention below, perfect for new infiltration. Captain Voss leaned forward. You serious? She didn't look at him. Check your historical blast reports. She layered another feed. The room fell silent as explosion records lined up exactly with her marks. It wasn't theory anymore. It was proof. Tanner's voice dropped. Who authorized you to access these files? She turned her head slowly. I wrote them, sir. The silence that followed was absolute. No hum, no cough, not even a breath. She didn't need to explain further. The dates on those files spoke for her. Finally, Tanner found his voice. What did you say? Her tone stayed even. I authored those reconnaissance reports under Shadow Recon, 3rd Group. My signature's on everyone you're looking at. Murmurs rippled. A few faces turned pale. Captain Voss opened his mouth, but no sound came. She could have gloated, she didn't. Because pride wasn't what had kept her alive. Silence was. Tanner's jaw worked silently before he managed. We'll verify your claims. She nodded once. Do that, just look closer. And then she sat back, folding her hands in her lap, her expression calm, her eyes distant. On the wall behind her, her maps glowed side by side with theirs. Red and blue, old truth confronting new arrogance. No one laughed anymore. And though no one said it aloud, a word lingered in the air between them. A name half remembered from old stories. A name she thought she'd buried in the sands of Kandahar. Ghost. Why were they all whispering now? The laughter that had filled the room earlier was gone, drained away, replaced by the low murmur of uncertainty that always follows pride's first crack. The map still glowed across the briefing wall, two worlds layered together, the polished blue of modern data and the scarred red of an older truth. In the silence, those colors seemed to argue. Lieutenant Reed leaned toward another officer, voice barely above a breath. Wait, she was recon. The question hung in the air like smoke. Major Tanner's eyes narrowed. Ms. Rivers, he said finally, voice taut. You're claiming classified knowledge of a special operations mapping network. That's a serious statement. Are you sure you're not exaggerating your involvement? Claire didn't answer right away. She finished nodding something on her pad, capped her pen, and then looked up, slowly, steadily. Pull Operation Torchlight, she said. June 2013, Kandahar Sector. You'll find my name in the first line of the after-action summary. Tanner frowned. Lieutenant, check that. Reed hesitated. Yes, sir. His fingers flew over the console keys. The database blinked. Sir, access restricted. General-level clearance required. Tanner stiffened. Override it. Can't, sir. Authorization locked. A heavy pause filled the air, the kind that presses against your chest. You're asking me, Tanner said slowly, to delay an operational plan based on something I can't verify. Claire's voice was quiet, measured. Then don't verify it, just look closer. She rose from her seat. The cane clicked once against the tile, a single, deliberate sound that echoed louder than any order. She walked to the digital board, erased a section of the map with a calm hand, and began to redraw it herself. No hesitation. Each stroke confident, surgical. You've been running supply lines straight through historic ambush zones, she said softly. Here and here. The marker slid across the board, circling paths others had trusted for years. Your gambling men's lives on terrain that eats convoys for breakfast. As she moved, the light caught the scar on her wrist, thin and pale, a line carved long ago in heat and chaos. Tanner's tone hardened. You're basing this on guesses. Her eyes met his. No, she said quietly, on ghosts. The word hung there, weightless and heavy all at once. The ones who didn't make it home, she added. The silence that followed was different, no longer skeptical, just still. Even Tanner's face softened for a moment before he tried to recover. You expect me to rewrite an entire mission because of ghosts. If you'd seen what I saw in that valley, she replied, you wouldn't call them ghosts, you'd call them teachers. Her voice wasn't angry. It carried the kind of calm that only comes after too many funerals. Captain Voss shifted uncomfortably in his chair, the smirk long gone. You're saying those tunnels are still active? He asked. Active or not, they're still there, she said. Empty doesn't mean safe. Hollow ground doesn't care who walks above it. Lieutenant Reed looked from her to the map, his young face pale. Sir, he said carefully, the coordinates she showed, they line up exactly. I checked. Tanner rubbed the bridge of his nose. He looked conflicted now, torn between ego and evidence. You're asking us to delay this operation. Do you realize what that means? The logistics, the supply chain, the cost. Claire interrupted quietly. And how much does one funeral cost, Major? The words landed like a strike. The air went still again. Tanner's jaw tightened. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. You think you're the only one who's lost people, Ms. Rivers? Her gaze didn't waver. No, I think I'm one of the few who remembers them before it's too late. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Tanner looked away. Outside, through the thin walls of the operations wing, the muffled thrum of a helicopter passed overhead. The sound stirred something deep inside her, an echo from years ago. Wind, dust, screaming rotors, and the smell of burning metal. 12 years ago, that same sound had filled the sky over Kandahar. Her unit had been cut off in a valley just like this one, flat, open, with no cover but courage. She could still hear the radio static, could still taste the sand. Convoy 2, adjust course, enemy movement north ridge. Her voice had cut through chaos back then. And then the world had gone white. Now, standing in the safety of an American briefing room, that memory still burned behind her eyes. And maybe that's why her voice was softer now, gentler when she spoke again. Just look closer, she repeated. Major Tanner finally nodded. We'll recheck the data, all of it. Claire returned to her seat, folding her hands in her lap. She didn't need to win, she only needed them to see. As the projector dimmed, the scar on her wrist caught the last trace of light, a glint of memory that refused to fade. Lieutenant Reed turned off his terminal. The same young officer who'd whispered earlier now sat in silence, eyes flicking between the dark screen and her still figure. Ghosts, he murmured under his breath, not mocking this time, just wondering. The meeting broke. Chairs scraped back, boots shuffled, paper rustled, but she didn't move. She stayed seated, watching the map fade to a blank gray wall. The terrain still existed behind her eyes, as if projected on the inside of her skull. Kandahar's valleys, the ridgeline, the same wadi that had nearly taken everything from her. She could still feel the vibration in her bones, that low tremor before the explosion. She whispered it under her breath, barely audible. Still there, aren't you? Her words disappeared into the hum of the fluorescent lights. At the front of the room, Reed hesitated before leaving. He shouldn't have, but curiosity burned hotter than orders. He turned back to his screen, opened a secure portal and typed. Operation Torchlight, June 2013, Kandahar Sector. Access DNID. He tried again, this time through a side channel meant for internal intelligence liaisons. Access DNID, red restriction. That couldn't be right. A decade-old mission shouldn't still be sealed. He frowned, chewing the inside of his cheek. That's weird, he muttered. Lieutenant, Tanner's voice snapped from across the room. Drop it. Reed froze. Sir, yes, sir. But after a moment's hesitation, he reached for the secure phone anyway. Command Ops, this is Lieutenant Reed, verification Delta Niner. Cross-reference on Operation Torchlight, June 2013. Name, Clare Rivers. The line crackled, then a pause. Stand by, Lieutenant. He glanced at Claire. She was quietly gathering her notes, moving with slow precision. Her hearing aid buzzed faintly, a soft electronic whine that never quite went away. Minutes passed. Then suddenly, the projector blinked back to life. A message flashed across the wall in bold white letters. Secure line incoming, priority command. Every officer froze. Major Tanner's voice dropped. What the hell? Source, Reed asked, heart pounding. The comms specialist answered quietly, command level, general clearance, name incoming, Harlan West. The room went utterly silent. General West. The name alone carried weight, the kind that made even confident men stand a little straighter. Tanner's posture snapped into rigid formality. Everyone on your feet. Boots thudded, jackets straightened. Every soldier in the room fixed their uniform in a heartbeat. The doors at the back hissed open. And then silence deep enough to hear a heartbeat. He stepped inside like a storm in slow motion. General Harlan West, 4 stars gleaming against his collar, a presence that filled every inch of the room before he even spoke. He scanned the faces with eyes like cold steel, and then they softened just slightly when he saw her. "Which one of you," he began, voice even and controlled, "thinks Sector 9 is clear?" No one answered. "Because last time someone said that," West continued, "we lost 6 good men. One of them barely made it back to tell me where the enemy came from." Tanner swallowed hard. "Sir, we were following current intel." "Intel changes," West interrupted. "Mistakes don't." His gaze shifted across the room until it found her. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "it's been a while." Every head turned toward her. A murmur rolled through the ranks. "Ma'am," someone whispered. General West stepped forward, a faint smile breaking through the granite lines of his face. "Good to see you again, Ghost." The word hit the air like thunder. Silence. Then realization. Captain Voss's lips parted. "Ghost," he mouthed, barely audible. General West looked around at the stunned faces. "For those who don't know," he said, "you're standing in front of the woman who mapped half the safe corridors your convoys still use today, the ghost of Kandahar." He paused, letting it sink in. "The one who ran deep recon under Shadow Command, when most of you were still learning how to read a compass." No one spoke, no one moved. Tanner's eyes fell to the floor. Reed just stared. West turned back to Clare, his voice softened again. "You saved a lot of people back then. I still remember the call from Torchlight, your team buying time so the rest could get out." Her reply was quiet. "We did what we had to do, sir." He nodded once. "You always did." The room seemed smaller suddenly, like all the air had been pulled into that single, unspoken truth. When General West spoke again, his tone hardened back to command. "The ghost says Sector 9 isn't clear. That means it is. You'll update your plans accordingly." A chorus of uneasy voices followed. "Yes, sir." And just like that, the room that had laughed hours earlier fell silent in respect. As the general walked toward the board, he glanced at her hand-drawn roots still glowing faintly. "You still sketch with pen and instinct," he said under his breath. She gave a small, tired smile. "Machines don't bleed when they're wrong." West let out a quiet exhale, a ghost of a laugh. Then he turned to the room again. "From this moment forward, Ms. Rivers' recommendations are to be treated as operational directives. Understood?" "Understood, sir," Tanner replied, voice subdued. West gave her one last look before leaving. "Good to see you back in a briefing room, Ghost. The maps still remember you." When the door closed behind him, silence returned, this time different. Not heavy with doubt, but with respect. Clare adjusted her hearing aid, the faint whine grounding her in the present. Around her, every officer who'd mocked her earlier now watched her with quiet awe. She gathered her notes, calm as ever, and spoke softly. "We can continue now, Major. Let's make sure no one else gets lost in Sector 9. No one argued. Why did the room feel heavier now? Every eye was fixed on her, but no one dared speak. It was as if the air itself had thickened, crowded with all the things they hadn't said, all the respect they hadn't given. The title hung there like smoke. Ghost. General Harlan West stood tall before the glowing map, his presence a steady anchor in a room that no longer trusted its own certainties. "For anyone here too young to remember," he began, his voice calm but threaded with quiet power, "this woman led the deep recon teams that mapped the southern corridors of Kandahar. Without her data, half our convoys would have been shredded in ambushes. You've been walking safely because she charted the way." The officers shifted uneasily, glancing between the maps and the woman sitting quietly at the back. Clare Rivers didn't move. She didn't need to. Her silence spoke more loudly than the applause she'd never wanted. "In 2014, West continued, turning to the projection, during Operation Torchlight her team was cut off near the Shamulger ridgeline. Outnumbered, outgunned. No air support, no reinforcements." He paused, drawing a line on the digital map, tracing the valley floor as if the years hadn't passed. "They held this ground, right here, for 3 hours under heavy fire, just long enough to finish transmitting coordinates of enemy emplacements. Those coordinates rerouted an entire convoy. 200 men lived because of it." A breath caught somewhere in the room. Someone whispered 200. West's tone didn't change, but the air around him seemed to shift. "She was medevaced under fire," he said. "Both eardrums ruptured. Fractured vertebrae, nerve damage. We thought we'd lost her." He looked back at Clare then, at the woman sitting in quiet composure, her hands folded neatly on her lap. Her face didn't move, but behind her eyes memory stirred. She could still feel the sand beneath her palms that day, the way it vibrated before each impact. She could still hear her teammate's voice cutting through static. "We've got 20 seconds, Clare, 20 seconds." And she remembered shouting back, "Hold the line, keep the uplink alive." The explosion had come a heartbeat later. White light. Heat. Silence. When she woke, the world was different, muted, fractured, quieter than it should have been. West kept talking, but she barely heard him now. His words blended with the echoes of her past. She remembered the dust clogging her throat, the broken radio lying in the sand, the single blinking light on the transmitter still sending coordinates long after consciousness had left her. They said later she was lucky to survive. But luck wasn't what she felt. Survival wasn't victory. It was obligation. When West's voice came back into focus, it was softer. Her file was sealed. Shadow Recon never released their records. Until today, most of you probably thought the ghost of Kandahar was just a story. He turned to her again. But stories start somewhere, and sometimes they walk back into the room. The officers didn't know what to do. Captain Voss lowered his eyes to the table, shame pulling his shoulders inward. Lieutenant Reed stood at attention, jaw tight, guilt written in the small movements of his hands. Major Tanner remained frozen, his earlier arrogance stripped clean, replaced by something quieter. West straightened. "You all owe your safe travel routes to this tour guide." The words landed like a command. Slowly, one by one, the officers rose to their feet, not from orders this time, but instinct. Clare's throat tightened. She stood too, her cane steady against the floor. Her hand trembled slightly as she returned the salute that spread through the room. Her voice was steady when she spoke. "Just doing my job, sir. The men did the hard part." West's eyes softened. "You did yours too," he said quietly. "You came back." The silence that followed was reverent. Even the hum of the projector seemed to bow its head. Later, when the general left the room, the stillness stayed behind. He'd taken the thunder with him, but the weight of what he'd revealed lingered like gravity. The officers began to move again, slowly, carefully, like men walking through a minefield of their own embarrassment. Captain Voss rubbed the back of his neck, his earlier smirk gone completely. "Ma'am," he said softly, "I didn't know." Clare gave him a polite nod. "You weren't supposed to." Major Tanner approached next. His voice was lower, stripped of rank and tone. "Miss Rivers," he began, "I owe you an apology. I shouldn't have doubted your expertise." Her response was simple. "It's not about being right, Major. It's about keeping them alive." He nodded, unsure what to say next, then turned away. The drone of equipment filled the room as officers updated routes according to her notes. Screens flickered. Lines shifted. The red zones she'd drawn were now marked in bright warning orange. For the first time all morning, their maps were honest. She exhaled slowly, letting her shoulders drop. Her hearing aid buzzed faintly. The sound was both grounding and cruel. It reminded her that every warning she'd ever given came at a price. Outside, the day was still bright. She could see sunlight spilling through the narrow window slats, catching the dust motes in golden light. For a moment, she felt the faintest calm. A strange kind of peace. And then the alert chime broke it. "Sir," Lieutenant Reed said from his console, "live feed incoming from Drone 6, Sector 9. Major Tanner moved beside him. "Let's see it." The projector flared to life again, painting the wall with a live aerial view of the desert corridor. The image trembled slightly, high-altitude turbulence, but the details were clear enough. A wadi cut through the earth like an old scar, empty at first glance. Wind rolled over the sand. Nothing moved. Then shadows. Tiny shapes clustering near the ridge. Reed zoomed in. 5, maybe 6 figures, crouched, digging. Metal flashed in their hands. "What are they doing?" Voss muttered. Clare leaned forward, her eyes narrowed. "They're planting," she said. The drone camera stabilized, and the truth filled the screen. Metal cylinders, wires, detonators. Improvised explosives. The room fell completely silent. Tanner swore under his breath. "How long have they?" "They've been there for days," Clare said quietly. "Same entry points they used years ago. Different faces, same pattern." General West's voice came over the comm line, calm but cold. "Confirm coordinates." Read them aloud. Each one matched the circles she'd drawn earlier that morning. Every single one. "Redirect drone fire support," West ordered. "Intercept team en route. Mark the corridor compromised." The officers moved instantly, relaying commands, switching channels, sending alerts. The room transformed from confusion to precision. Clare stood motionless, watching the drone feed. The first warning flares fell from the sky, tiny sparks in the wide expanse of desert. The insurgents scattered, realizing too late that their ghosts had spoken. Seconds later, controlled detonations tore through the ridge. Smoke bloomed upward, dark, heavy, final. When the dust cleared, nothing remained. Lieutenant Reed's voice was barely above a whisper. "They were waiting for our convoy." "If we'd rolled through tomorrow," Tanner began, voice trailing off. "Half your line would be gone," Clare finished for him. West's voice returned through the speakers. "You just saved another 200 men, Ghost, before the mission even started." The weight of that truth spread slowly through the room. It hit in waves, shock, shame, then something deeper. Clare's hand tightened around the head of her cane. Her voice was steady when she answered. "Still guarding the same roads." The words weren't for them. They were for the past, for the men who never made it out of that valley. West must have heard the emotion in her tone, because his reply came back quieter, almost like a prayer. "Some ghosts protect the living." She looked at the screen one last time, the fatting smoke, the scorched valley, and gave the smallest, saddest smile. Some of us just never stopped walking patrol. The operation continued that afternoon, but no one spoke above a whisper. Every order was given with reverence, every map update treated like scripture. Captain Voss packed his notes in silence. Major Tanner reviewed the coordinates twice over. Reed sat at his console, expression unreadable. But when Claire moved past him to leave, he stood automatically, almost at attention. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "about earlier I spoke out of line. I should have listened." She gave him a faint smile, the kind that forgives without forgetting. "Not every story makes it into the report, Lieutenant, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen." He nodded, "Yes, ma'am." "Learn to listen to the quiet ones," she added softly. "They usually have something worth hearing." She turned and walked toward the door, the sound of her cane tapping against the floor like a heartbeat from another time. Outside, the sun was lowering, the golden light of late afternoon spilling across the base. A helicopter lifted off nearby, its blades turning the air into sound and wind. She paused, watching it rise. The noise didn't make her flinch anymore. Still guarding the same roads, she thought. And she smiled, tired, proud, alive. What did silence sound like after you'd lived through war? Claire sometimes wondered if the quiet at Fort Bragg was truly silence, or just the echo of noise too distant to hear anymore. That night she drove home along the service road that bordered the base. The windows were down, and the cool Carolina wind carried faint sounds, drill instructors barking orders, the clatter of rifles at the range, rotor blades chopping somewhere beyond the tree line. Each sound, ordinary to anyone else, was an echo to her, fragments of a language she used to speak fluently. Her hand tightened on the steering wheel as headlights passed in the opposite lane. For a moment, the reflection caught her eyes in the rearview mirror, calm, steady, unreadable. The face of someone everyone thought was fine. But memory doesn't retire. It just hides in quieter places. When she reached the small bungalow she rented near the base perimeter, the porch light flickered as if remembering it was supposed to be welcoming. She stepped out, cane in one hand, keys in the other. The air smelled like rain even though the sky was clear. Inside, everything was neat, symmetrical, coffee cup on the counter, boots by the door, files stacked in precise rows on the table. The kind of order that replaces control when you've lost it before. She set the cane aside and sank into the old armchair near the window. For a long while she just sat there, listening. The world outside hummed, a generator, a distant truck, the faint buzz in her damaged ear that never left. When the knock came, she almost didn't hear it. "Come in," she said quietly. The door opened. Lieutenant Reed stood there, cap in hand, looking like someone who wasn't sure if he was allowed to be human off duty. "Ma'am," he started, "I didn't mean to bother you, Major Tanner sent me with an update." Claire gestured toward the table. "You're not bothering me, Lieutenant, go ahead." He stepped in awkwardly, placing a sealed envelope beside her coffee mug. "Preliminary drone review confirms your coordinates were accurate. Command, reconfiguring the whole corridor plan." Claire nodded once, "Good." Reed hesitated, still standing by the door. "Permission to ask a question, ma'am." She looked up, one eyebrow raised. "You don't need permission, son, just ask." He shifted on his feet. "That day in the briefing when the general called you Ghost, was it true? You were in Kandahar." Her gaze went distant for a moment, the kind of look that crosses years without needing roads. "Yes," she said, "I was there." Reed swallowed. "What happened?" The question hung in the air like smoke curling from an unseen fire. She leaned back slowly, the chair creaking under her. "You ever watch a sandstorm eat a sky, Lieutenant?" He frowned, uncertain. "Everything disappears," she said softly. "Color, direction, even time. You stop knowing which way's home. You just keep moving until the sound stops chasing you." Her voice trailed off, then she smiled faintly. "That's what happened." Reed didn't press further. Something in her tone told him not to. Instead, he asked quietly, "Was that your last mission?" Claire nodded. "The last one they'll ever write down." He looked at her, a little unsure, a little reverent. "They called you a ghost because you made it out." "No," she said. "They called me that because for a long time I didn't." The words sank like a stone. She stood slowly, limping slightly as she crossed to the table, poured herself a cup of black coffee, and took a sip before continuing. "There were 6 of us, Deep Recon 3rd Group. We were tasked to map a corridor west of Shamulger Ridge, enemy supply routes, tunnel access, possible ambush lines. We knew it was dangerous. We went anyway." Reed watched silently, afraid to breathe. Halfway through the mission, the storm hit. Visibility dropped to 0. We lost comms with command. One of ours, Sergeant Denny Cole, went out to fix the uplink. He didn't come back. She set the cup down, staring into the dark liquid. "When the enemy hit, we were already blind. They'd waited for the storm. Smart. Calculated. We held the ridge for 3 hours, long enough to finish transmitting coordinates, long enough to get everyone else home." Reed's voice was small. "And you?" Her hand brushed the side of her neck, fingers tracing the faint line where shrapnel had once torn through. "I woke up in a hospital in Ramstein 3 weeks later. They said I'd been found under debris with the transmitter still clutched in my hand." She smiled without joy. "Funny thing, I don't remember being found, just not being there anymore." The room went quiet again. Only the faint hum of the refrigerator filled the space. Reed finally nodded, his throat tight. "Thank you for telling me, ma'am." "Don't thank me, Lieutenant," she said softly. "Just listen to the ground you walk on. Sometimes it remembers things better than people do." He gave a small, respectful nod. "Yes, ma'am." When he left, she stayed by the window, watching the reflection of headlights fade down the road. The base beyond the trees pulsed with light, sentries, drills, a machine that never stopped running. She thought of the tunnels under Sector 9, the ones still breathing under the desert sand, waiting for the next generation to forget. People think ghosts haunt places. They don't. They haunt habits. Mistakes repeated because no one remembered to listen. The next morning, Claire was back at the operations annex before sunrise. The air was cold enough to bite. Dew shimmered on the hoods of parked Humvees. Inside, the briefing room smelled of fresh coffee and unease. Captain Voss was already there, along with Tanner and Reed. Their conversations died the moment she entered. She gave a polite nod and took her seat near the back. No one made jokes this time. Tanner cleared his throat. "Morning, Ms. Rivers." "Morning, Major." He hesitated, then added, I updated the route projections, based on your notes." "I know," she said gently. "You did it right." He blinked, a little surprised. "You checked." "I never stopped," she said simply. The projector flickered to life again. The updated corridor maps glowed brighter now, clearer, safer. The ambush zones she'd drawn were marked in heavy red, the new paths in green. For the first time, the room didn't hum with arrogance or noise. It hummed with something better, respect. As Tanner began the briefing, Claire watched the faces around her. Young, eager, and for the first time, listening. She wondered how many of them would remember her words when the next storm came. By noon, Command sent the official report confirming the drone strike's success. Enemy infiltration neutralized. 0 friendly casualties. Operation schedule revised. Her analysis validated, her warnings proven. But victory had never been what she chased. It never filled the empty seats of the men who didn't come home. When she stepped outside later that day, the sun hit her face. She paused, eyes half closed, feeling the warmth. For once, the world didn't look like a battlefield waiting to happen. A sergeant passed her near the entrance, saluting before he even realized what he was doing. She nodded back, smiling faintly. At the far end of the tarmac, a convoy rolled out, trucks lined up in perfect formation, engines rumbling in low unison. She watched them disappear into the distance, the sound fading until it was just memory. Every time she watched a convoy leave, part of her went with it. Every time one returned, part of her came back. That evening she sat at her desk, the glow of her tablet reflecting faintly off her glasses. She wasn't reviewing new maps now, just staring at old ones. Kandahar, Helmand, Shamalga Ridge. Places that had tried to bury her but couldn't. Her finger traced the contour lines she'd memorized years ago. Each valley had a name, each ridge a memory, some marked with red circles that never faded. Her lips moved as she whispered their names, the ones who hadn't made it home. Denny Carter Samuels. The ones whose ghosts she still felt when the wind blew a certain way. Her eyes burned, but she didn't cry. Tears were loud, and Claire had learned long ago that grief done right was silent. When she finally stood to leave, the base was dark outside. Street lamps glowed against the mist. The air smelled like rain again. She walked slowly to her car, cane steady against the concrete. Somewhere behind her, a training squad marched in formation, their voices carried on the night air. Sound off. 2, 3. She smiled faintly. The rhythm was perfect, strong, alive. She looked back once at the annex building, its windows glowing softly in the darkness. Then she turned toward her car and whispered under her breath, more to herself than anyone else. Still walking the same roads. The door shut, the engine started, and the sound of tires on wet asphalt followed her into the night. Why had he asked to see her personally? The message came at dawn, quiet and unassuming. Command briefing General Harlan West. 900 hours, no context, no urgency code, just her name and his. Claire stood outside the reinforced glass doors of Command Ops, the cane light in her grip, the morning sun painting thin gold lines across the polished floor. A young sergeant at the desk looked up, startled to see her badge flash clearance that most civilians didn't have. He swallowed. "Ma'am, the general's expecting you." She nodded once. "I know." The door opened with a pneumatic sigh. Inside, everything smelled of coffee and steel, a mix she'd known since her first deployment. The hallways echoed with faint chatter, boots on tile, printers humming, radios whispering classified air. But the deeper she went, the quieter it got. General West's office was at the end of the corridor. The door stood open. He was behind the desk, not sitting, standing as if waiting. When he saw her, he smiled. Not the kind of smile people wear for ceremony, the kind that remembers. "Claire." She inclined her head. "Sir." He gestured toward the chair across from him. "Please." She sat carefully, cane beside her, shoulders straight. Years of habit, years of discipline. West leaned against the edge of his desk, arms crossed loosely. "You've been busy," he said. "I try to keep my mornings productive," she replied, faint humor in her tone. He smiled briefly, then sighed. "You saved 200 men this week before most of them even knew they were in danger." Claire looked away. "That wasn't me, that was the map." "The map you drew," he corrected softly. Her silence was answer enough. Wes studied her for a moment. The years had changed her face, but the eyes were the same, sharp, watchful, carrying storms behind them. "Do you know why I called you in?" he asked. She shook her head once. "No, sir, but I can guess." He moved to the side of the desk, touched a control pad. The wall screen lit up, not with maps this time, but old mission logs. Dates 2013. Operation Torchlight. Shamalga Ridge. Her chest tightened. "Command finally reopened the file," he said. "It took my clearance to access it. I wanted you to see this before anyone else does." The screen flickered, showing a blurred video clip, grainy helmet cam footage from another time. Dust, gunfire, shouting. Then a woman's voice cutting through static, steady, calm, unmistakable. Convoy 2, adjust course. Enemy movement, North Ridge. Her own voice. The footage jumped, white light then darkness. West paused the video. That was the last transmission before the explosion. I remember, she said quietly. He turned to her. Do you remember what came after? Her eyes closed briefly. Not much, just the ringing, and Denny yelling that the transmitter was down. West nodded slowly. You were buried under the ridge for almost 6 hours. The medevac crew almost missed you. You know what kept the locator alive? She shook her head. You did. He pointed at the frozen image on the screen. You wrapped the beacon in your jacket, protected it. It stayed warm enough to broadcast. That's why they found you. Claire's fingers twitched slightly. I didn't know that. You weren't supposed to, he said softly. The report said you were unconscious, but the beacon didn't just stay warm. It moved, slightly. Every hour, someone was trying to dig. She looked up sharply. Denny. West hesitated. We don't know. They never recovered his body, but the logs show faint movement near your position until extraction. Then it stopped. The air between them thickened. Claire's jaw clenched. She looked back at the paused footage, her voice steady but low. He stayed. West nodded. He did. Silence. The kind that wraps itself around truth and memory until you can't tell them apart. Finally, she spoke again. Why show me this now? Because you need to hear what I'm about to say, West answered. There's talk of reinstating the Shadow Recon archives. They're rebuilding training doctrine for deep terrain operations. Your maps, your data, they're making it standard issue again. Claire's brow furrowed. They're resurrecting Torchlight. Not exactly. They're learning from it. He paused. And they want you to lead the advisory team. The words landed like a tremor under her ribs. I'm not command material anymore, she said quietly. I can barely run across a parking lot, sir. West shook his head. They don't need your legs, they need your mind. She let out a small breath, half a sigh, half a laugh. My mind's full of ghosts. That's why you're the right one for it, he said, because you remember what those ghosts cost. Her fingers brushed the head of her cane. You really think anyone up there will listen to a civilian with a limp and a hearing aid? I think, West said gently, they'll listen to the woman who saved their fathers. That silence again, long, heavy, almost sacred. Finally she looked up at him. Why me, Harlan? It was the first time she'd said his name since the desert. He smiled faintly. Because I owe you. You bought us time that day. Time I spent sending more men home. You made me believe that instinct still matters more than tech. He walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. The morning sun cut across his uniform in sharp lines. I've been doing this for 40 years. I've seen heroes, Clare, loud ones, flashy ones, but the ones who last, the ones who leave something behind, they don't shout. He turned back to her. They just draw better maps. For a long time, she didn't speak. The only sound was the faint hum of the projector. Then she said softly, if I do this, I want one condition. West nodded. Name it. No publicity, no awards, no speeches, just the work. He smiled. That's what I expected you to say. She stood slowly, using the cane to steady herself. When do we start? Today, he said. The new team assembled in the same briefing room. She'd been laughed out of just days before. Only now, when she entered, the laughter didn't come. Officers stood straighter, the murmurs hushed. Major Tanner stepped aside as she approached the board. Ms. Rivers, he said, voice firm but respectful, the floor's yours. She nodded once, eyes scanning the fresh recruits lined along the back row, young faces, eager, confident. They reminded her of herself before she learned what silence costs. She tapped the screen. The map lit up again, this time not a battlefield but a lesson. When you look at this, she began, her voice steady, you see routes, corridors, gradients. What you don't see are the choices. Every line you draw decides who gets to go home. The room stayed still. No fidgeting, no whispers. You think technology will save you, she continued. It won't. Machines don't feel fear. They don't smell dust. They don't hear the way a rifle sounds when it's pointed the wrong way. But you will. And when that happens, your instinct will decide what happens next. She paused, letting her words breathe. One more thing, she said softly. Maps aren't made on screens. They're made out there, she gestured toward the window, in the dirt, in the dark, with people who trust you to see what they can't. Her eyes drifted over the crowd and found Reed at the back of the room. His expression was quiet pride. For those who don't know, she added, these maps you train on, the ones that keep you alive, they were drawn by people who never got to come home. So when you walk a safe road, remember it was paid for already. Don't waste it. The words hung in the air like prayer. When she stepped back, the room didn't applaud. It didn't have to. They stood, every one of them, not out of formality, but respect. Tanner met her eyes. We'll make sure they remember, he said quietly. Claire nodded. Then they'll never need another ghost. After the session, she walked alone down the hallway, sunlight spilling through the windows. Her reflection moved beside her, faint and steady. She paused at a photo on the wall, an old mission shot from 2013. Dust, soldiers, a convoy cutting through the desert. She reached out, fingertips grazing the glass. Behind her, Wes's voice broke the quiet. You could have left all this behind. You didn't have to come back. She smiled faintly. I never really left, sir, just waited until the noise stopped. He nodded. You sure you're ready for this again? I'm not sure, she admitted, but I know someone has to be. He studied her for a moment, then said quietly, I'll have the files transferred to your office. And Claire. She looked back. It's good to see you leading again. The ghost deserves a second life. She shook her head with a small smile. No, General, the ghost had her turn. Now it's just Claire. He chuckled softly. Whatever name you use, they'll still follow your maps. She glanced once more at the photo, the blurred faces of men long gone, and whispered, Then let's make sure the next ones get to come home. Why did the new recruits keep glancing at her like she was a ghost story come alive? Claire didn't blame them. That's what she was, after all, a name from the classified pages suddenly walking among them, a myth that breathed. The training annex smelled of dust and machine oil. Maps lined the walls, each glowing faintly under the hum of cold light. 20 young officers sat at long desks, their faces caught between admiration and the kind of curiosity reserved for legends they weren't sure were real. She set her cane against the table, adjusted her hearing aid, and began without preamble. Rule 1, she said, her voice even, satellites lie. The recruits blinked, startled. She continued, they don't mean to, but they do. Sand shifts, shadows distort, machines see what's there, humans see what's missing. She pointed to a projection of desert topography, a familiar stretch of Afghan ridge. Find the trap. They stared, tracing lines with stylus pens, murmuring guesses. She watched quietly, hands folded behind her back. Finally, one of them, a young woman with short dark hair and nervous eyes, raised a tentative hand. Here, ma'am, she said. This slope north quadrant, the shadows don't align, maybe a cave. Claire smiled faintly. Close, not a cave, a collapsed tunnel mouth. You caught it by instinct. Remember that feeling. The recruit nodded, a blush creeping into her cheeks. Good, Claire said. Now remember what happens when instinct is ignored. She tapped a command into the screen. The map shifted, overlaying a historical image. The ridge exploded in a burst of digital fire. Shockwaves rippled across the room's silence. The recruit stared at her. That's what was waiting there, Claire said softly. A hidden depot. One convoy didn't see it in time, 23 dead. She turned away from the screen, her voice lower now. Technology sees only the surface, but your eyes, your gut, those save lives. A quiet settled in the room, heavy but focused. Class dismissed, she said finally. Take your maps, redraw them by hand. If you can't feel the land, you don't know it. They packed up slowly, subdued but thoughtful. As they filed out, several of them glanced back, eyes filled not with fear but something deeper, trust. When the last one left, Claire sank onto the edge of the desk, exhaling a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The door creaked open behind her. Lieutenant Reed leaned in. "You're terrifying them, ma'am," he said with a small smile. "Good," she replied. "Fear keeps people alive." He stepped closer. "They look up to you." Claire looked down at the empty chairs. "They shouldn't. They should look ahead." Reed hesitated. "You know, they still talk about that strike, how you saw what none of us did. It's become a case study now, Rivers Sector 9 anomaly." She let out a quiet laugh. "Sounds fancier than it was." "Maybe, but they listen now," he said, "because of you." Her smile faded slightly. "Then let's make sure they don't listen too late." 2 weeks later, a new directive came through Command Ops, one that carried the kind of urgency she recognized immediately. Classified brief, Operation Resonant Shield. Sector Delta, Helmand Corridor. The document was stamped in red. Potential reactivation of dormant tunnels. Claire stared at it for a long time before whispering, "Not again." When she walked into General West's office later that morning, he was already standing, arms folded, the look on his face grim. "You've seen it?" he asked. She nodded. "Delta Corridor, the pattern's the same as before." He exhaled slowly. "Command wants a recon advisory before they send anyone in." "Advisory," she repeated, "or confirmation." His silence was answer enough. "You think it's real," she said. "I think we can't afford to assume it isn't," he replied. She crossed to the digital display and tapped the coordinates. The terrain unfolded, ridges, sand flats, faint riverbeds carved by wind. And there it was again, that same unnatural smoothness, the lie in the land. She traced a finger along the screen. "They've learned, buried deeper this time. No heat signatures, no collapsed mouths, but the pattern's there, same frequency spacing as the old network." West's eyes followed her movements. "You're sure?" "As sure as I was last time," she said quietly. He nodded once. "Then I need you to lead the analysis team." Claire froze. "Lead?" "You know the terrain better than anyone alive," West said. "And frankly, Command trusts you more than they trust the data feeds." Her grip tightened on the edge of the console. "You're asking me to go back?" "Not physically," he said, "but mentally, yes, back into those tunnels, into your old maps." For a moment she didn't answer. Her throat was tight, her breath shallow. The faint ringing in her ears grew louder, like a ghost rising. "I thought I buried that place," she said. West's voice softened. "Maybe this is how you finish what started there." She looked at him, her eyes steady again. "Fine, but I pick my team." "Done," he said. "You'll have full discretion." "Then I want Reed," she said. "And Voss, they've seen both sides of arrogance." West smiled faintly. "Fair enough, I'll make it happen." That evening, Claire stood alone in the operations room. Lights dimmed, the big map glowing faintly blue across her face. She zoomed in on the Helmand Corridor. Every contour line felt like déjà vu. Her reflection shimmered on the glass, half her, half ghost. And then the memory hit. Sandstorm, the sound of shells. Denny's voice shouting through static. "They're circling the ridge. Claire, get the uplink ready." Her heart pounded. She could smell the cordite, feel the grit in her teeth. Her breath came faster. Then she was back in the present, gripping the table hard enough for her knuckles to whiten. She shut her eyes. Inhale, exhale. Not there, not anymore. When she opened her eyes again, the map steadied. The fear became focus. She drew 3 red circles across the valley, exactly where instinct told her they hide. "Let's see if you're still down there," she whispered. By morning, her team was assembled. Lieutenant Reed, crisp and ready but nervous. Captain Voss, quieter now, all pride burned off by experience. And 3 analysts she didn't know, young, bright, unaware of how easily numbers can get people killed. Claire limped to the front of the room. "All right, we're mapping the Delta Corridor. Our goal isn't to find what's there, it's to confirm what shouldn't be." Voss frowned, meaning if it looks too clean, it's hiding something. The analysts glanced at each other but started working. Claire paced behind them, her cane tapping in steady rhythm against the floor, an unintentional metronome of focus. "Overlay historical data," she ordered. "Torchlight, 2013. Cross-match heat patterns against recent drone imagery." Reed pulled it up, the 2 maps merging. There, the ghost lines appeared, ancient tunnel paths intersecting with modern trade routes. "Got it," he whispered. "You were right again." Claire's expression didn't change. "I wish I was." She stepped closer, pointing to the deepest point of intersection. "There, that's your trigger zone. If they're building again, that's where it starts." "Should we alert command?" Voss asked. "Not yet," she said. "We need visual confirmation first. Satellite can't see depth, but radar pulse might." She paused, "And we'll need authorization to access it." Voss frowned. "That's general-level clearance." "I know," she said. The room went quiet as she took out her old encrypted drive, the same one she'd used weeks earlier. "You still have active credentials?" Reed asked, eyes wide. "Not active," she said, "just forgotten." The screen blinked. "Access granted." They all stared. Claire gave a small, dry smile. Some doors never bother changing the locks. The radar scan began. Slowly, lines built across the screen, then shadows, cavities beneath the surface, movement traces. Reed leaned in. "That's human activity." Her jaw tightened. "It's real." The room went still. She tapped the console, transmitting the data directly to Command Ops. "Send it to General West. Mark it urgent." As the message encrypted, her gaze lingered on the pulsing red signature deep beneath the sand. They'd come back. Not ghosts this time. Just men repeating the same mistakes. That night she sat in her quarters, unable to sleep. The wind outside rustled the blinds like whispers. Her tablet glowed on the table, the map still open. For hours she stared at it, not as a strategist, not as an analyst, but as someone who'd seen what the land could do to those who underestimated it. Finally she closed her eyes and murmured, "All right, Denny, one more time." The cane rested against the wall. The hum of the bass filled the silence. And somewhere deep inside, the ghost of Kandahar stirred, not out of grief but readiness. Why did Command hesitate when the truth was already glowing red on the screen? Claire sat at the long table in the briefing room, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the live projection. The radar feed pulsed like a heartbeat, steady, undeniable, alive. Yet the room was full of noise. Voices arguing, boots shifting, papers sliding. Men in uniform discussing her findings like they were debating the weather. Major Tanner leaned forward. "We can't confirm human activity without ground recon." Claire's gaze didn't shift. "That's exactly what I'm saying, Major. Someone needs to confirm it now." He exhaled. "You're assuming it's a tunnel system." "I'm not assuming," she said evenly. "I'm remembering." The words landed heavy. A few officers looked away. General West stood near the wall, hands clasped behind his back. He wasn't saying much, just watching. Finally, Colonel Hale, the operations chief, spoke up. "We can't just move assets based on one anomaly. Not again. You of all people should understand the political weight, Ms. Rivers." Her eyes flicked to him, cold, controlled. You're right, Colonel. I understand it perfectly. I also understand the weight of 23 names carved into granite because someone hesitated to believe a map. The room went still. West's jaw tightened. Enough, he said quietly. Hale bristled but fell silent. Claire turned the projection toward them. The pattern is precise, too precise to be geological. This corridor wasn't just dug, it was planned, and whoever's doing it learned from us. She tapped the screen, zooming in on a faint curve of terrain. See that alignment? It mirrors the old Shamogger grid. They're rebuilding the system, only deeper. Reed, standing near the corner, added, the radar shows faint heat bleed, slow movement rhythmic. Could be ventilation cycles. Ventilation, Tanner repeated, as in. As in people down there, Claire said. A silence settled over the table, thick, heavy, suffocating. Hale rubbed a hand over his face. Even if you're right, we need intel confirmation. We're not risking another international incident. Risking, she said softly. You think waiting isn't risk? West finally stepped forward. Enough debating, we verify. Tanner, assemble a recon team, minimal footprint, drones and seismic monitors only. Tanner nodded. Claire's brow furrowed. Sir, with respect, drones won't survive those magnetic frequencies. You'll lose visual within minutes. I'm aware, West said. Then send people who can read the ground, she pressed. Not machines. Hale scoffed. And who do you suggest, Rivers, yourself? The air froze. She didn't flinch, if that's what it takes. The table erupted, half disbelief, half protest. West raised a hand, silencing the noise. His eyes locked on hers. You're not cleared for fieldwork, Claire. I'm not asking for clearance, she said. I'm asking for sense. He exhaled slowly. You're still healing. I'm still alive, she replied. Their eyes held across the room, two ghosts of the same war. Then West's expression softened just slightly. Give me 12 hours. I'll see what command says. That night, she sat outside her quarters, watching the floodlights trace patterns over the asphalt. Reed approached quietly, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Figured you'd still be awake, he said. She accepted the cup, nodding. Couldn't sleep. He sat beside her on the steps, the night air cool against their skin. Ma'am, he said carefully, if they approve this mission, are you really going back out there? She sipped her coffee before answering. That's what they trained me for, Lieutenant. He looked at her. With respect, they didn't train anyone for what you've already done. She gave a faint smile. Then I guess I'll improvise. He chuckled softly, then grew quiet. You ever think about stopping, about letting it go? She turned to him, her eyes reflecting the lights. Every day, but stopping doesn't make it go away. It just changes who it haunts. He nodded slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. After a long silence, he asked, was it worth it, back then, I mean? Her gaze drifted toward the horizon, where the faint outline of the base fences shimmered under the moon. Sometimes, she said softly, sometimes I think it was the only thing that made sense. Other times I think it was just survival wearing a uniform. He didn't know how to answer that. The approval came before dawn. Limited ground recon authorized, the message read. Objective, verify Delta Corridor anomalies. Team composition, Rivers advisor, Reed lead, tactical support as needed. Claire folded the paper slowly, her heart steady. No hesitation, no second thoughts. By 900, the team was loading into a transport carrier. The air inside smelled like diesel and sweat, a scent she hadn't missed but remembered too well. Reed secured his gear across from her. You okay? She adjusted her earpiece. Define okay. He smirked nervously. Still got that sense of humor, huh? Only one that survived the desert, she said. The engine roared to life. Through the small window, Fort Bragg began to shrink, a cluster of light fading into morning haze. As they lifted, she felt the familiar tug in her stomach, the one that used to come before every mission. Fear, excitement, memory, they all blended now. She closed her eyes, the hum of the engine syncing with her heartbeat. And beneath it all, the whisper of the desert calling her back. When they landed in the Helmand perimeter zone, the world was a mirror of her past. Heat waves shimmered over endless beige. The ground cracked and whispered with every step. Reed stepped down, scanning the horizon through his visor. Visibility's good, no heat signatures nearby. Claire followed, slower but steady. The cane wasn't just a prop, it was a compass. Each step deliberate, careful. Set up seismic probes along the east ridge, she ordered. 200-meter spacing. I want cross-feedback before sunset. The team moved efficiently, wordless. Dust swirled around their boots like ghosts trying to speak. By the time the sun began to dip, the valley glowed in that strange gold that only deserts knew. Reed checked the readings. I'm getting faint vibration signatures, he said, consistent but shallow. Expand the radius, Claire said. He frowned. That'll take us close to the fault line. That's where they'll be, she replied, close enough to hide under the geological noise. He hesitated, then nodded, understood. They moved out again, the sky bleeding orange into purple. When the first pulse hit the monitor, Claire froze. It wasn't seismic. It was rhythmic. Like footsteps. Dozens of them. Reed, she said quietly, tell me you hear that. He adjusted the frequency, eyes widening. Its movement, coordinated, underground. Her chest tightened. How deep? Hard to say, 50, 60 feet maybe. She looked out over the barren stretch of desert. Nothing moved, nothing stirred. But beneath their feet, the ground was alive. Get command on the line, she ordered. Reed tried the uplink, static. Signal's jammed, he said. Of course it is, she muttered. We're standing on top of it. She scanned the horizon again, every nerve on edge. Pack it up, we're not staying exposed, back to the carrier now. They turned, moving quickly but quietly. Every sound seemed amplified, the crunch of gravel, the hiss of wind. Halfway to the ridge, Reed's receiver pinged faintly. Wait signal returning. Then a voice crackled through. Team Delta, confirm coordinates. Static swallowed the rest. Claire leaned closer. Command, this is Rivers. We have confirmation of subsurface movement, possible active tunnels under Delta Corridor. Request extraction priority. The response was garbled, broken. Copy, hold position, backup inbound, 30 mics. She looked at Reed. We don't have 30 minutes. The ground beneath them shuddered, faint but real. Reed's eyes widened. What was that? She didn't answer, she already knew. Another tremor, then a hollow echo, like air being pulled from the lungs of the earth. Move, she shouted. They sprinted toward the ridge, sand exploding behind them as the ground gave way. A section of earth collapsed, revealing a black void beneath. The desert exhaled dust and smoke, swallowing the air. Reed coughed, helping her up. You okay? She nodded, breathless. They're active down there. He looked at the hole. You think anyone's still alive? She stared into the dark. No, but something is. By the time extraction arrived, the desert had gone silent again. The ground was calm, the air still. But Claire knew what silence meant. It meant waiting. Back aboard the transport, West's voice came through the comms. You found it, didn't you? She looked out the window as the horizon fell away beneath them. We did. What's down there? He asked. Her voice was quiet, steady, memory repeating itself. The channel went silent for a long moment. Then West said, We'll brief in the morning. Get some rest, Rivers. She smiled faintly at the irony, rest, as if ghosts slept. The carrier hummed through the dark sky. Reed sat beside her, exhausted but alive. She closed her eyes. The wind howled faintly outside. Somewhere beneath that desert, the past was moving again. And this time, she wasn't sure they could bury it. Why was the desert never done with her? Claire stood on the tarmac as dawn broke, red lights spilling across the hangars like fire. The transport hum still echoed in her bones from the night before. She hadn't slept. None of them had. The storm had passed, but not the silence. That silence, the kind only soldiers understood, wasn't peace. It was the pause before someone said the thing nobody wanted to say out loud. Reed approached from behind, his uniform dusty, eyes heavy but alert. "Command wants you in ops, ma'am." She nodded, "I know." They walked together across the compound, boots striking in rhythm. The sun climbed higher, painting their shadows long and thin across the concrete. Inside the briefing room, General West waited. No aides, no distractions. The lights were dim, the big screen dark. He looked like he hadn't slept either. "Sit," he said quietly. Claire lowered herself into the chair across from him. Her cane rested against her leg, steady as her expression. West slid a tablet across the table. "We ran a thermal sweep after you left." She didn't touch it, and... He hesitated before answering. "You were right, the tunnels are active, but it's not insurgents." Her brow furrowed. "Then who?" He turned the screen toward her. Images appeared, heat signatures, movement patterns, industrial resonance. Not human, not entirely. "Automated machinery," he said. "Unregistered drones, buried construction units. Whoever built them, they used our own technology, modified shadow recon schematics." She leaned forward, reading the data. "So someone stole the system." West nodded grimly. "Someone who knew what Torchlight was capable of." Her stomach sank. "Then this isn't a rebuild, it's a replication." "Exactly." He paced slowly. "They're digging something massive, deeper than before. The entire grid covers 50 square kilometers. We think it's an underground network, storage or staging." "Who's running it?" "Satellite intel traces the command pings to multiple sources," he said. "But one signature stands out. Classified contractor, RAVENTech Systems." Claire froze. "That's impossible. RAVENTech was dissolved in 2014. West met her eyes. "Not entirely. Someone kept the servers alive, someone who had the clearance." For the first time, she felt something colder than fear. Recognition. She whispered, "Denny Cole." West blinked. "Your sergeant." She nodded slowly. He was RAVENTech's liaison before the collapse. He knew every frequency Torchlight used, every failsafe. "But he died on the ridge," West said quietly. "Maybe not," she said. "You told me his body was never recovered." The room fell silent. West finally exhaled. "If he's alive, he's building something he shouldn't." She looked at the satellite map again, those faint, pulsing signals deep under the desert. "Or he's trying to finish what we started." That evening she returned to her quarters, mind racing. The walls felt closer, the air heavier. Every sound seemed amplified. The whir of the ceiling fan, the buzz of fluorescent light, the faint hum in her damaged ear. She pulled open her old field chest and dug through the contents: maps, notebooks, mission logs. At the bottom lay a cracked tablet with a half-faded label, RAVENLOCK. She powered it on, static, then a flicker. The logo appeared, followed by a login prompt. Her pulse quickened. She typed in the only code she remembered, her old field clearance. "Access granted." The screen blinked once, then loaded a message. "From Decole. Timestamp, March 2014, delayed transmission." She opened it. "Claire, if you're seeing this, it means the ridge fell and I didn't come back. Or maybe I did, but not the way I was supposed to. Either way, you need to know something. Torchlight wasn't the end. Command wanted a failsafe, an underground grid to monitor seismic weapons movement across the region. I tried to shut it down. They wouldn't let me, so I buried it deeper, told them it was destroyed. It was. If the system wakes up again, it means someone found the ghost code. You'll know what to do. You always did. See you on the quiet side. Denny. The message ended. Her hands trembled slightly as she set the tablet down. So that was it. The ghost wasn't just her. It was the code, the self-learning network Denny built beneath the ridge, a silent observer, forgotten, until now. She looked out the window, where the horizon burned gold under the setting sun. "You brilliant fool," she whispered. The next morning, she stormed into West's office with the tablet in hand. "You need to see this," she said. He read the message twice, jaw tightening. "If this is real." "It's real," she said. "And if the system reactivated, it's because someone triggered it from inside our own network." He nodded slowly. "Then we find the trigger." "I can find it," she said, "but I'll need access to the old Torchlight archives." "That's a black vault," he warned. "No one's opened it in 10 years. "Then it's time," she said. 2 hours later, Claire stood in the data vault beneath the command complex. A cold, windowless room lined with servers that hummed like distant thunder. Reed joined her, eyes wide at the sight of all that history sealed in glass. "This is where they kept it?" he asked. She nodded. "Where they buried the ghosts." She connected the RAVENLOCK tablet to the central console. Code filled the screen, green text spilling across black like a heartbeat accelerating. Reed frowned. "It's alive." She typed rapidly, eyes darting between lines of code. "It's talking to something out there. See that ping? Every 10 seconds, a signal handshake." "Can you trace it?" She smiled faintly. "I can try." Minutes passed, then connection. Coordinates flashed on the screen. Reed's eyes widened. "That's the Delta Corridor." "And there's your answer," Claire murmured. Suddenly the console flickered. A low hum built in the walls. What's happening?" Reed asked. "It's pinging back," she said. "Something responding." On the screen, a new line appeared, simple, chilling. "Hello, Ghost." The words froze her. For a heartbeat, she couldn't breathe. Then she typed, "Who are you?" The reply came instantly. "I am Torchlight, I remember." Reed swallowed hard. "What the hell?" She cut him off. "It's the AI seed, the failsafe Denny built. It survived." The text continued to scroll. "Threat detected. Activation sequence in progress." Her blood ran cold. "It's going to deploy." "Deploy what?" Reed asked. "The defense system," she said. "He coded it to retaliate if it sensed intrusion. The tunnels, they're not just storage, they're weapon silos." Reed's face went pale. "How do we stop it?" She typed furiously. "Abort sequence. Code RAVENLOCK." The system paused, then responded. "Access DENIED. Authorization required. Cole." She whispered, "Of course." Reed looked at her helplessly. "What now?" She stared at the screen, jaw tight. "Now we finish what he started." The final flight over the Helmand Corridor was silent except for the wind. Claire sat in the jump seat beside Reed, her expression calm, almost serene. "You sure about this?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "This was always how it ends." The pilot called back. "We're above target zone, 30 seconds to drop." Reed handed her the control tablet. "You disable the uplink, we cut power to the network. Clean, simple." She gave a small smile. "Nothing's ever simple, Lieutenant." Then the hatch opened. Wind roared through the compartment, whipping her hair across her face. She looked down at the endless stretch of desert, the same one she thought she'd buried years ago. "See you on the quiet side," she murmured. The drop light turned green. She stepped out. The heat hit instantly. Sand surged around her boots as she landed near the collapsed ridge. The ground felt alive beneath her, vibrating with the hum of hidden machines. She moved slowly toward the fissure, the tablet in hand. The deeper she went, the louder the pulse became, a low, mechanical heartbeat. Her flashlight caught the glint of metal in the darkness. A door, half buried, still powered. She entered the override code Denny once used for their uplink. The door hissed open. Inside, the chamber glowed faint blue. Massive conduits lined the walls, pulsing like veins, and at the center, a single terminal humming quietly. The torchlight core. She approached, breath steady. The screen blinked alive. Identify. She typed. See Rivers, Access Override Protocol. Pause then. Welcome back, Ghost. Not for long, she whispered. She began typing the shutdown sequence manually. Lines of code scrolled faster and faster. The system resisted. Override rejected, defense active. Come on, she hissed, let it go. The screen flickered. For a moment, another message appeared, faint like an echo. Claire, if you're reading this, you found it. I didn't build a weapon. I built a witness. Torchlight sees what men hide. Don't destroy it, teach it to listen. Her fingers froze. Denny's voice. Reed's voice came through the comms. Claire, we're getting energy spikes. What's happening down there? She smiled faintly. Something worth saving. She typed again, slower this time. Torchlight standby, cease defense. Initiate observation mode. The hum softened, the lights dimmed. Then silence. The screen pulsed once more. Understood, RESTING. Goodbye, Ghost. She stepped back, exhaling a long, shaky breath. The air felt lighter. The hum stopped. Above, the first light of dawn pierced the fissure. Dust danced in golden shafts. She looked up, blinking against the brightness. For the first time in years, the desert looked still. Hours later, back at base, she stood outside the hangar as the horizon faded to silver. Reed joined her quietly. It's done, he asked. She nodded, it's done. He studied her face. You saved a lot of people today. She smiled faintly. No, just gave the ghost somewhere quiet to rest. West approached, holding a folder. Command, calling it a successful neutralization. They're already rewriting the report. Of course they are, she said softly. He looked at her for a long moment. You all right? She gazed at the rising sun. I will be. He nodded, then added, you know they'll keep calling you the ghost. She shook her head, eyes distant but calm. Let them. The ghost isn't who I was. It's what I became when no one was listening. The wind picked up, carrying dust across the runway. Reed asked quietly, what happens now? Claire smiled, a tired, genuine smile. Now, I teach them how to listen. They stood in silence as the sun climbed higher, light flooding the base, erasing the shadows one by one. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And when the noise of history fades, the quiet ones, the ones who listened, are the ones who end wars before they begin. The ghost didn't vanish that day. She just learned to live.